Hello, everyone, and today I'm going to be talking about Empire Realism, which is, I think, perhaps one of the most underrated mods for Empire Total War. Now, some of you might be surprised that I'm talking about Empire Total War, and you shouldn't be, because my first video ever on the channel was actually a retrospective review of Empire Total War. So it's a game that I don't dislike, and I like talking about it. And I've only done one mod review for Empire, or a couple mod reviews for Empire Total War on the channel. So I figured this would be a good way to kind of break up the Rome Remastered, Rome Total War Medieval 2 content and talk about something else for a bit. So Empire Realism is a major mod for Empire Total War that I don't think gets enough attention. And I think it doesn't get enough attention partially because it's not one of those flashy total overhaul type mods. It is a total overhaul type mod, don't get me wrong. But you can see by the title screen, for example, that it's not, it's not like it's not instantly recognizable like Darthmod Empire or something. But this mod has a lot of merits. So let's go into the Grand Campaign. As you can see, nothing seems different here. I mean, the only thing different at the beginning is that there's a more realistic colony setup for the Imperial powers with overseas empires. But let's, in fact, start a game here. Just for, as an example. So Empire Realism is a mod that focuses pretty much 100% on gameplay. There's very little changed in terms of the atmosphere, in terms of the aesthetic, and I think that's okay. So let me explain that for a minute. So Empire Realism overhauls the gameplay of Empire. So if you like the vanilla style of Empire, right, the vanilla style units, the vanilla style unit rosters, which have been changed a little bit. I don't want to say it's the same, but you won't find like a million different types of line infantry to recruit. It's going to be very categorical in terms of what you can recruit. Like you've got the provincial line infantry, you've got the standard line infantry, and then certain elite units in particular areas. But you don't get like specific divisions, right, in certain areas. And with mods like that, you start getting UIs where it's very difficult to actually see what units you can recruit in particular areas. And this mod avoids that, which I actually like a lot. So this mod, as you can see, since it doesn't change too much in terms of the aesthetic of the game, you can actually apply whatever aesthetic graphical mods you want. So for example, I have applied the historical portraits mod by Durango, and so I have these very nice portraits that totally fit in with the Empire aesthetic, that are much nicer than the goofy vanilla kind of medieval 2 style portraits, right? And yeah, Empire Realism, like I said, is focused 100% on gameplay. So campaign gameplay as well as battle gameplay. Now, in terms of the campaign, things have been slowed down quite a bit, right? And it's not as easy to upgrade everything at the start, right? Like in Vanilla Empire, first turn is very similar for a lot of the factions. You just go around, upgrade everything, and then march somewhere and conquer a province. That's going to be very difficult to do in Empire Realism. So as a faction like Austria, you can upgrade a few things, no doubt. And Austria has actually pretty much a better starting position than some other factions like Russia, for example, which has a pretty tough start position since you start quite underdeveloped in terms of the economy. But you have to sort of pick and choose. Things take longer to construct. It's difficult to upgrade your economy. However, it does feel rewarding over time when you do these things, because then eventually you'll find that you can support larger units. It's also difficult to just recruit huge armies right from the start, right? It's not it, it's just a little bit slower pacing. Think of it as like epic or marathon pacing in Civilization. It's more or Europa Barbarorum pacing, right? Now, in terms of the gameplay, I'm kind of selling it short a little bit here, because in terms of the campaign gameplay, pretty much everything has been overhauled, even though it doesn't look like it's been overhauled too much. So in Empire, the pacing, in my opinion, was a little too fast and vanilla in terms of the campaign gameplay. So it was too easy to just march, let's say as Austria, too easy to just march down to Constantinople and Greece and take all of it and then keep going, right? You just kind of snowball from there. In Empire Realism, it's a little bit more difficult. You have to consolidate. It's difficult to overextend. You start having economic problems if you expand too quickly. And at the start, you'll notice that early artillery, this is one of the huge things, our early artillery is extremely slow on the campaign map, and in battle as well. This is also reflected. So early artillery like the Sakers here are very fixed, very slow firing, and very inaccurate. They're basically mostly just for show. Even though it's good to have them, they are not extremely effective. Whereas once you get mobile artillery, then you're in business. So let's talk a little bit about battle here. So I suppose I'll get into a fight just as an example here. So let's keep going. And actually, I take it back. I hadn't actually played as Austria in this mod before. And yeah, the economy is actually not great for Austria either. So at the start, for quite a few factions, it's actually pretty difficult to get your economy rolling. And you'll find that you actually do have to raise taxes, especially at the start of the game, if you want to actually be able to fund what you're doing. Okay, so we're in a battle now. And you can see there's only 2 units of artillery here at the start. Or you have 2 cannons in the early artillery units. I believe this goes up to 4 in the later artillery units that are, again, much better than the early ones. And it feels more like a revolution sort of in tactics when you have access to the better artillery, the horse artillery. So in terms of battle, there's a lot to talk about here in Empire Realism. Now, there are very minor things in Empire Realism in terms of a graphical modification. So there are some mods that make militia seem more like militia in terms of, I believe, the backpacks, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, Empire Realism kind of focuses on the battlefield smoke. So it includes a version of the battlefield smoke mod, a tweaked version of that. And that, it actually looks quite nice, not as bombastic as, for example, the smoke in Imperial Destroyer or Darthmod. But it looks pretty nice. It looks pretty nice. And it's not too hard on your computer if you don't have the best hardware like me. Additionally, morale has been seriously tweaked, right? So you'll notice at the next to eager, right to the right of eager, it says good order. So instead of having updates on the morale of your particular units, the game actually talks about order, right? The order of your units. And what does that mean? That actually has to do with the cohesion of the unit. So what's more important than or it's not more important, but the morale of the unit completely depends on its cohesion. And what affects cohesion? Now, it's pretty much very similar to morale, right? It works very similar. It's basically the same kind of mechanic, but it's just totally rebalanced and reworked in Empire Realism. So if you've played Chivalry, for example, Chivalry has a somewhat similar style morale system. So if you have your general nearby, inspiring your units, if you have your infantry line, your battle line intact, right? If you have units next to other units, backing each other up, if you have reserves protecting the flank of your unit, if you have inspiring units next to your perhaps provincial line infantry, if you have if you're prepared for an enemy flank attack, or if you're flanking yourself, your units will respond positively, right? If your unit, let's say it's a decent unit of line infantry, and the enemy is charging you from the front with cavalry, right? That sounds like you're in a good position. But if your infantry is not backed up properly, if your infantry unit is in the middle of nowhere, like this Polish-Lithuanian unit, then actually your unit, even though it might beat the cavalry if they stay in line, they won't be able to. They will break. They will run because you allowed that cavalry to charge at your unit without support and break its cohesion. So it kind of breaks your lines. The cavalry breaks your lines, and then the unit loses its good order, and that causes a huge morale hit. And if your unit is not backed up by other troops, then it will break. It will break, and that's actually quite nice about this morale system. Now, it's pretty easy to break enemy units, let's say, that are not supported, right, by other units. However, if you don't have enough troops to chase down that unit, to make sure they are shattered, then in Empire Realism, it's actually pretty easy to have units rally, to have infantry units, cavalry units rally if they've been broken easily. So for example, if you have an infantry unit that's like here routing in the middle of nowhere and was flanked, not like totally defeated, but didn't have any support, and now it's routing, right? However, I don't have the troops. I don't have a cavalry unit here. Well, I actually do. To chase them down and actually shatter them, right? So you can see they're at medium disorder. So that's actually pretty nice. So if I'm unable to chase down this unit, which let's say I won't be, then actually when my guys turn to go and engage with the other infantry units, with the rest of my army, this guy is going to come back, no doubt, because he's not shattered. He's just at medium disorder. And that's actually pretty cool, because in a lot of battles, certain flanks rout, right? Certain flanks rout, but then if the rest of the army doesn't break, and that unit actually rallies and comes back, then that decides many battles, right? That has decided many battles in history. And that's actually really cool. I wish that was in more Total War. I wish more Total War mods were able to kind of nail that battle mechanic. So the enemy line infantry was actually able to get off a volley before my guys, which is unfortunate. But actually, if I'm able to flank these guys, I think I'll be in a better position. But I'm not going to have enough time. This guy is not supported. And the enemy's firing at point-blank range. That's not good. But in any case, I hope I've explained these mechanics well enough here, because really just talking about them doesn't really do them justice. You saw them in action here because this enemy unit was actually able to come back and rally. So I have to reform my infantry here and start fighting back against this infantry unit. So you can see casualty rates are actually not so bad unless you're at point blank range, right? Or unless you have a clear line of sight as well. Which, of course, I also really appreciate. Because in a lot of mods, the casualty rates are just too high. It's not realistic, right? And, you know, that's fine in terms of the gameplay. I don't dislike mods that have the casualty rates too high because then, you know, it feels cool to have decisive battles, right? It's totally a cool feeling. However, once in a while you want to have that realistic experience, especially in battle. And this mod definitely provides it. You have to really command your troops in a realistic way. And that's something I feel like is missing in Total War sometimes. And not just in vanilla, but in mods as well. Even so-called realism mods, there are some that I don't think have this mechanic enough, right? So we've got pikemen and militia here. So if I charge my cavalry into this militia, I think we'll be able to break them pretty easily. But they have their pikemen in front, so I'll avoid them for now. The enemy's not facing me, so what I'm going to do is bring my guys a little closer to the grenadiers. Grenadiers are actually quite good in this mod, especially in melee. Because again, they were made up of just elite troops, right? The grenadiers, and also big guys, so much better in melee. I think that is a pretty good explanation of the Empire Realism mechanics. Now, of course, I can't explain everything and show you right now because as you unlock more units in the tech tree, which has also been overhauled a lot in this mod, you'll find that the progression is actually quite nice. And naval combat has also been overhauled in this mod. And while I'm not the biggest naval combat expert, especially in terms of Empire Total War, I'm not the best at naval battles. However, naval combat is totally overhauled. Privateers have much better piracy ability, even after unlocking an ability with a certain tech tree, the Letters of Marque tech, if I'm not mistaken. You can actually have your frigates do piracy as well and actually take income from enemy trade routes as well, which is quite nice indeed. Now, again, like I said from the start, this mod is very minimal in terms of the graphical upgrades, right? So the main thing that this mod does is the realistic tweaks to the battlefield smoke mod, and which looks nice enough for me. I mean, there are other mods with more bombastic smoke. However, the fact that this mod is minimal in terms of the graphical upgrades is actually good because it allows for more flexibility in the player. You can actually apply whatever graphics mods you want that affect medieval or vanilla units. I've been saying medieval so much. That affect vanilla units and actually apply them, and they do not have any problem working with Empire Realism. And I think that is something refreshing to see in a total overhaul mod, because even overhaul mods that have minimal graphical upgrades like the Rights of Man, which I've reviewed on the channel before, they required specific sub-mods to get graphical mods like Ornamentum, which look very nice, to work, right? Or the Regalia of Nations. mod. So actually that I think is one of the strengths of the mod, because a lot of people prefer certain tweaks to the game, right? In terms of the graphical style. And a lot of the overhaul mods don't really give you the choice that a mod like Empire Realism does. So, as you can see, I think I've broken the Polish army here. But I have to actually keep going because these grenadiers are firing at me and they're in good order. And like I said, grenadiers are a pretty elite unit here, very good in Empire Realism, so I have to break these guys as much as I can. As you can see, these guys, these pikemen, or in these militia, they're only at light disorder, right? So I really have to stay close to them if I don't want them to reform, and if I want to end this battle, really, with a rout, with a nice rout of the enemy. And the mod actually shows you that really nicely. It really shows you the likelihood of an enemy coming back. So if they're in good order, you want to chase them as much as you can. If you have the units, you've got to chase them as much as you can, because they will come back and you will have problems. So I think that's actually pretty much everything I wanted to say about Empire Realism right now. I mean, I didn't talk about everything in this video, but I hope I've said enough and shown enough to where you might be interested in this mod, because I think this is a very underrated mod for Empire Total War. The feel of the battles is very nice, very epic. It's much more... it's quite immersive in terms of the tactics. It feels like one of those older... there was this game about the Civil War, I remember. Not Ultimate General, it was from before that time, like around the time of Age of Empires and Command and Conquer. It was about Gettysburg and commanding those troops. There was one about Waterloo as well, I remember. It reminds me of those old realism, epic sort of battle simulator type games that are top down. It really does feel like that in terms of the mechanics. So I hope you get interested in this mod, because it is quite nice, and perhaps the mod maker Jam will be looking to upgrade this mod, make a new version sometime soon. Maybe next year. Who knows? Nobody knows. All right. If you enjoyed this video, and if you like videos about the historical Total Wars and their mods, consider subscribing to the channel, and consider liking this video, and I'll see you in the next one later.